Welcome to the WellCast. The world has a lot to say. We're bringing a biblical perspective to those conversations.
Welcome back to the WellCast. This is your host, Melissa Danisi, and I am excited. Today we get to talk about the foundational practice, living on purpose. And I have two of my friends here. It is a girl power podcast today. So I have Alex Register here with me to talk about purpose and Rosa Torres. So why don't you guys start by introducing yourselves? Tell us a little bit about who you are, your daily life, how long you've been at the well, that kind of stuff.
You ready to go? All right, cool. I'm Alex Register, and let's see. I've been at the well for probably 6 years now. Yeah, 6. It's murky. I don't know. And about me, I'm married to my husband, Daniel, 9 years. We have 4 kiddos, ages 2 to almost 10. And they keep us very, very busy, as you can imagine. Between all their 4 personalities, 3 of them are girls, so it's a wild whirlwind over there in my house.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We're learning a lot. And let's see. Professionally, it's always hard when someone asks me what I do because I do a lot.
You do a couple things, huh?
I'm an entrepreneur. And so I own a business that has a bunch of different departments in it. So I consider myself a graphic designer, an illustrator, and educator.
Yep. What do you do? How do you serve at the well? What are some of the things you do here?
How do I serve? I am involved in WSM. I'm going on my 3rd year with them. My girls are seniors, and WSM is Well Student Ministries, specifically high school ministry. And so, I've been with them for a couple years. And then I serve with Women's Bible Study.
Woo!
Yeah, so I lead a table with a co-leader. Been doing that for a couple years as well.
Yep.
So fun. I'm Rosa Torres. I've been a part of the well for a long time. I feel like since we were at FIG when we first started.
Oh, a long
time I've been here. And so it's been fun. I've seen the different stages of wellness. And so just where we've been, where we're doing, and where we're heading, it's been fun. I'm actually on staff, so I get the honor and privilege of working in our missions department. So I get to help connect people to going on exposure trips and if you want to intern, and then just helping our ministries connect to local organizations for serving and everything. So that's my job. It's fun. I really enjoy it. And then I serve here by doing student region on Monday nights for our high school students. I've been doing that for about maybe 2-3 years now. It's been a blast. Region changed my life, and so I just couldn't commit to doing it for like a year again, but I can totally commit to a semester.
Because student region
is semester-based, yeah. So it's just been a lot of fun. I coach middle school leaders because I used to do youth ministry back in the day, and I just was like, I think I've aged out of that. And so I kind of was just like, how do I love on the leaders?
No, you're
Don't
still
say
cool.
that.
I am not cool, but thank you. And so I just kind of say, hey, how do I love on leaders so they can love on their students? And then I am currently leading a life group with some of my friends. They volunteered me as their leader. So I said, here I go.
That's how it happens sometimes.
It is,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
I think that's everything I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you shared just kind of like the brief version of things you do, ways you serve. So how are some of those things, how would you say you're living on purpose as you do those things, or this season of life?
Oh, man. I think I grew up going back and forth to like Mexico visiting family. And so I remember, I think for me, living on purpose is like literally my job. I enjoy connecting people to like just seeing God in a different way. And I get to train and equip, and I'm using all like my experiences, my abilities, everything to be able to point back to Christ. And like, this is why we are designed. And then even just all like my past hurts and anxieties and fears, taking what the enemy really was going to use against God, right? To something that was could have just hindered me from ministry, and using that for God's glory. And so just being like, okay, Lord, I went through region for a season because I struggled with anxiety. So how do I help other high school students who, if I wish I had somebody in that age mentor me and teach me what it's
that's
like
beautiful.
to live Christ like. And so how do I do that here?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
How about you, Alex?
Ditto.
Okay.
I think, I resonate with so much of that. And I would say very similarly, so much of everything that I've experienced before coming to know Christ and here, being in a relationship with Christ, challenges me to intentionally pursue a life that honors him, right? And so what that looks like for me personally, there's so many different facets of it because there are so many different areas of my life, whether it's as a wife or as a mom, being really intentional with pursuing God's will for me as a parent and as a wife looks so much differently than it does in the workforce. And I mean, there's so much overlap, but they are different. And so what that looks like at home, it's just, both of them, it's full surrender to just constantly laying down my own cross and my own struggles. But at work specifically, and how I really see this play out and how the Lord's really gifted me, I guess, uniquely to be in the entrepreneurship arena and in the business arena is really just before Christ, I had this business, and I just remember completely asking the Lord, like, why didn't you give me this? I don't want this. This is not my wheelhouse. I had no desire to own a business or run business. And I remember once I came to know Christ and once he utilized that business to save me, it was very clear to me that this was for his glory. And so up in like literally that day, sitting in a cup of joy, I was like, okay, this is all yours. And so now every day, every decision I make, every conversation I have, for me, it's been really an eye-opening experience that I don't want to say all business, but the workforce and the business world, especially for young women, it's really vital to project God's glory in that space, where it's completely void. Not completely, but I don't want to say completely, but it's absent. There's a lot of self-promotion and there's a lot of self-glorification. Yeah. So it's just really made known to me that I need to intentionally pursue how I can glorify him in this space. Yeah. And honor him in all that I do there, because otherwise it's just not worth having. So
that's beautiful.
In that realm, that's what that looks like.
We're going to talk about, as we talked about this practice living on purpose, there were 5 areas. If you're doing the Foundations curriculum, you looked at this, that you have experiences that God's given you, passions, abilities, gifts, and personality. That was the other one, personality. But can you maybe back us up and give us a little, behind the scenes of, because you said, I had this business and I didn't want this business, and God changed my mind about how to use this business. So what is your business and how did that start? So I know that story, but tell the others of what were you doing, to get to.
So it's it's a long story, and I'm going to give you a little cliff note really quick. But I started this business purely out of just desire to spark my creative, just to ignite the creative side of me. I just had my first child, and I really my husband worked 2 jobs, and I really wanted to support and contribute to our family. I've been working since I was 14. So that was the first time I was home, and I was a mom, and it's great, but it also was hard for me. And so I started a home business where I was essentially using the gift that the Lord's given me of creativity and design to create bridal and bachelorette apparel, because I was getting married at the time and my best friend was getting married. And so that was what we did. And so the first 3 years of my business was primarily bridal bachelorette. And so in those 3 years, that's when the Lord really started working on my heart. And my business grew rapidly. We went from just me to having multiple employees, having our own office within just a year. And so it was really eye-opening to this has a lot of potential. I could really do a lot with this. I mean, revenue-wise, it was amazing. It was just it was crazy. The Lord it's amazing to see how he's utilized that and taken me from high to real low. And then now I feel like I'm at like a pretty even keel understanding of like, wow, what, now I know why you walked me through that. So back me up. Let's see. Okay. So year 3 into my business, that's when he really convicted me. And, at that point I started shifting out of the bridal bachelorette world and started focusing on lifestyle apparel. And so that's what we are today. If anyone knows, my business is KLSD. And so if anyone knows us today, they probably know us for our faith-based apparel. And if anyone's been following for a long time, they would know that it didn't start as faith-based. It started as just more so like positivity and just, like good stuff. Just trying to like spread what I felt at that time was just like being a good person, right? Yeah. And even like our slogan thing in the beginning was like, be a good human. That was like the thing. And so that's kind of what we've become known for. And the Lord just continued to pull on me in that space. Wow. And so now, when he saved me completely, now everything we do is is the whole mission of the company changed. And it was just to share the love of Christ with all of his people. And so, we do that through our apparel, through events that we host. And now I have the privilege and the honor. We have an education department. And so we get to go into schools all across Central Valley cool. and share about digital illustration and design and screen printing and all that stuff. So the Lord, which has been on my heart for a really long time, was just the youth. And that's why I'm in youth ministry, but it's a different avenue. And so we don't necessarily go in and talk about Jesus, but in public schools, but we do in a different way, if that makes sense. So I think that was the question, right? Okay.
Yeah, of just because you had just briefly mentioned that you had a business, you didn't really want it, and then the Lord said, I'm going to show you what to do with this. So that's interesting, even to hear you move from this kind of general be a good human to now, and I've seen you, share some pretty vulnerable, like, I don't know what the Lord is doing, but you're more outspoken about your faith, and it's been beautiful and encouraging. So
thank you.
I don't even remember the original question I asked her, but we brought up the 5 different areas that are uniquely you, your experiences, passions, gifts, ability, and personality. And so you kind of just casually mentioned you grew up going back and forth to Mexico. So will you share maybe some of how your experiences, your personality, all of that play into what you're doing today and how that's you living on purpose?
Yeah, I'm first generation here. So I literally grew up going back and forth to Mexico visiting family. Back in the days when it was just with your passport, like you didn't need, or with your birth certificate, you didn't need your passport. And so we would go multiple times a year to visit family. And so for me, I grew up seeing poverty in a different way, but it was normal. And so for me, that just is how I was raised. And so it wasn't until I think it was probably about like 22, and I went to Romania for 2 months. I wanted to see a different part of the world, got an opportunity to go, and was there for 2 months, and just kind of remember like, man, there's part of the world that don't know the gospel at all. Like they just don't know Jesus. And doing VBS in a small little community, and for the first time, they are hearing what the gospel is, just kind of blew my mind at a 22-year-old. And so kind of was just like, Lord, are you calling me to long-term missions, and are you calling me to here? Because I was like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be, Romania. This is it. Didn't know the language, didn't really know the culture, but hey, they needed Jesus, and I was willing to be there. And over several weeks, he just was like, yes, but not here, not yet. Like I just knew this wasn't the place I was supposed to be at, but I knew I was supposed to go somewhere. And so came back and did life, moved to the Bay Area for a couple years, came back and was like, I don't know what I'm doing with my life. Was in a long-term relationship, broke up, and was just like, what's next? And had a good friend here who was a youth pastor, and it was like, oh, I'm going to Costa Rica. It's like Mexico. You should come. And I was like, it's not, but I'm in. I'm totally 100% in. And so I went, and just amazing peace just came over me. And it was just like, I could live here. Like I could be here. And so it took a couple.
How many years ago was that?
That is about 13 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah, it was 13 years ago. And I remember being like, I need to take a year of just praying through this. And so I took a year, prayed through it, went back again, still felt the peace of it. And then a year later I moved. So I moved in my early 30s, moved to another country, was, single, like, well, I guess I'm saying goodbye to marriage, and just literally lived there for 3 years. And I did everything from, I would say finance to being a host, working with like the local host families and just like hanging out with them, semester students, teams. And it was just so much fun. And then I just felt like I needed to come back home. I just felt God saying like, okay, you've learned everything I need you to learn. And I was like, okay. So I moved back and struggled a lot with anxiety and fear and just my identity because I was this person who lived overseas and I was a mission person and I thought I was going to be long term. And now I'm back and I'm in my late 30s and I'm single and I don't know what I'm supposed to do with life. And kind of was just praying through it. And I had a pastor here call me and was like, hey, we're hiring for a mission admin position and your name's not on the list. And I was like, and he was just like, well, we're starting interviews on Mondays. I need your name on the list. And so I was like, okay. So I filled out the application, submitted it. And God just really opened the door for me to jump in. And so my job has morphed from mission admin to mission coordinator, where everything that I've learned from being overseas, training, equipping, loving on interns, semester students, host mom, organizing, the ability to this is the long term, what we want to go. So what are the million steps we need to take to get there? Like I can see the big picture. It's what my job is now.
Yeah.
And so literally everything. And it's so much fun. Like I love when I send teams overseas and I'm like, I want to go with you and I can't. But then they come back and they tell me everything. And they're like, you train us well. I learned so much about myself, about God. And then having people who are like, I think I want to go back next year for like the summer. Great, and just pouring into them. Yeah. And we have a gal who's been overseas for 6 months. And the last year and a half, I've just been intentional pouring into her because I'm like, I know you're called the long term.
Oh, yeah.
So how do I train you and disciple you to be that person to go long term? Yeah. And so it's just been such a joy for that. And to be able to come back and just see like, okay, everything I've gone through has been for this purpose and reason.
Yeah.
And so...
And I hear that in your story of just you had passions, you had experiences as a child, and now those experiences of living overseas are shaping what you're doing for your job and how you're serving, and even seeing your gifts kind of come together with your experiences too. So I don't know if you have something similar like that where you kind of had that moment of seeing, okay, here's an experience I have, ability I have, and some of your gifts come together in that way.
Yeah, what's funny is I was processing this out, and I think I was processing it a lot with our group as we were doing this study. It's just there was a point where Brad asked us to sit and just reflect on like, is there anything God wants to tell you? And in that moment, I heard God say, like, all of the stuff that you struggled with as a child, as a young adult, all of the big parts of your personality, the creativeness that you couldn't hone in, and the boldness, the type 8, the passion, as Brad would call it, all of that you didn't know what to do with. Like I had a plan for it. And so, beautiful. And then take it one level deeper. And he said, and your daughter, I'm not going to name her name, this will be her walk too. And so I was like, man, it's so true, because today that looks like I lead teams, right? And because I am an entrepreneur and I have a team, I have to execute leadership and organization and creativity, all that stuff that I was like, what am I going to do with this? I can't figure this out. I keep getting in trouble because I'm drawing in my notebooks and I don't pay attention in class in college. I drop out of college because I'm not like an quote unquote like college educated girl. And I struggled with that identity and just not understanding like, why is this how he wired me? Why do I want to go toe to toe with people? Why do I want to like naturally kind of take the lead on things when maybe that's not mine to do? So just a lot of wrestling all throughout really teens and 20s, and just up until the late 20s is when I really started to feel settled in, when he grabbed me and was like, okay, now we're gonna mold this, and I'm gonna show you how to. Now that I've got the wheels, we're gonna show you how to ride. So kind of similar, but
it is true when all of those things come underneath the gospel, right? It starts to change. You start to see the value, the beauty, oh my goodness, what drove my mom crazy about me is what my Father in heaven wants to use for his kingdom. Yeah. So. Okay, so in that, and I feel like this is a huge thing for people, especially when we bring up living on purpose. I mean, both of you are amazing women of God. You've got a career. You're using your gifts. But has there been a time where you battled comparison
No, never.
Never. Good. Okay, easy podcast.
I'm good on that.
That's it. No. Or maybe even some encouragement for those of us that hear this and we know this is just, right, a thorn in our flesh of comparing ourselves to others. So what does that look like for you as you've discovered your purpose?
You got one?
Sure.
Okay. I was like, gosh, I don't remember what I wrote.
Yeah, I think for me, it's been just finding contentment in the season I'm in. I think comparison for me looks different. I am single, right? And so comparing like, man, I'm in my 40s and I'm not married. And these are some amazing women and some of my friends that are married and they're doing all these amazing stuff. And like, I will never be in that season. And so just really feeling contentment of being like, okay, so I'm not in that season. What are other single women that are my age that are doing things for God? That how can I look to them, even just as encouragers, you know? And like, what does that look like? And honestly, just even wrestling with God. There's a season where I just lamented. It was like, this is my singleness. I'm lamenting in it. And I think I feel like that was such a great, sweet time with God, just telling him this is where I'm at, but him being like, okay, but I'm still going to use you for my kingdom.
Yeah.
So be faithful to that.
Yeah.
And being like, okay, I mean, I limited my social media because that for me is the rabbit hole that would just play negative self-talk, thoughts in my mind. And so I literally now just follow fun influencers that travel everywhere, that make me want to travel everywhere, but in a way that I'm like, okay, like I am not comparing myself to all these amazing women who I love or who are just awesome speakers and influencers that I'm like, that's not my life.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah,
just learning how to balance what is biblical and what is not, and knowing that God's going to use everybody in every season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
I remember early on kind of discovering this teaching gift that I had or speaking in front of people, and same thing with social media. It was like this boom of women who were writing books and teaching and going everywhere and speaking. And I felt content and purposed in where I was at serving in the local church. That is like my heart, right? It's what I want to do. But I'm watching these women and feeling all of a sudden this comparison come over me. Like, am I supposed to be doing that? Is that what how this gift is supposed to play out? And I realized, oh my goodness, I'm robbing the joy of what God, I'm finally like found my lane, and it's stealing the joy from me because I'm watching someone else live it out differently. And I unfollowed a bunch because it was like, that's pressure. That's like comparison. So
Yeah.
okay, you have to share yours now.
I mean, honestly, you guys, I feel like the same. That's exactly, if I could respond, similarly, that's my process as well. It's like, I resonate exactly with what you're saying. And I really have to just consistently remind myself that, the Lord has me exactly where he wants me, me specifically, Alex Register. Like, he has gifted me uniquely, and I am me. Like, it sounds so simple. But there is none other like me, and that is, and he has me exactly where he wants me. Yeah. And similarly, like I've had seasons where I'm like, man, this should be going faster. Like I really, I feel like I should be here by now, in different things, but I have to really slow down and just remember, like, God's not in a hurry. And if that's for me and he has that for me, great. But if he doesn't, like, I just one step at a time, faithfully, looking up towards him. And that's like, I honestly have to just repeat that again and again and again. Because sometimes if my will comes into it, then that's where I start spiraling. And I'm like, but I want this. And I want
hustle.
that. Yes.
I can do it.
Yep. And so it's a daily for me. I mean, I said, no, it's a joke every day. Like it's a struggle every day for me. Coming from a background of like hustle culture, girl boss culture, this mentality of, a lot of my testimony is I can do it all for myself and I can trust nobody to do anything for me. So, that's just my natural struggle is just to be like, how can I be doing better? How can I be doing more? And then that comparison feeds that. And so it's really unhealthy for me too. Social media also, I have to really limit and make sure that I'm using that healthily, but I ditto all those things.
Yeah. And I can imagine in your world too, you feel that even more with like being a graphic designer and digital content, that like every day somebody's putting out something faster, newer, better, prettier, cooler, whatever it is, right? That you're having to battle that every single day. Yeah. And so it's beautiful to see the gospel take root in your heart, and that, you know, my identity is not in, you know.
Yeah, I had to let go of that. I mean, a couple years ago, really. And I do feel a lot of freedom now, which is really nice, because it took a while to just be able to rest and trust in the Lord in that. And just that, like, and I don't want to get into like a social media thing, but you know, it is a root of a lot of comparison, but you know, it's just like, I have to trust in the Lord that you're right. In my profession, digital media and marketing, everything is very prevalent, and it is tied to a lot of your success. And I just had to know that wasn't the season, that it was healthy for me and my business and where the Lord had me. And he really shifted my heart and my focus, and continues to remind me, trust me.
Yeah.
I got you.
I've watched you, even in your flourishing, say no, and say no to things that you just recently did this with Old Town Flea. Yeah, of just being able to say no and stay rooted with where he wants you. But talk a little bit about that process, because living on purpose, yes, it's discovering and it's learning to serve and say yes, but I think it's just as much learning to say no. So Absolutely. How have you guys lived that out?
That's definitely a process. It's a trial and error too, of just, I used to be a yes girl, especially like in my 20s. And I think there was a season for that. Like, I don't think that was a bad thing. And I don't want someone to hear that and think like, oh, I shouldn't be saying yes. If you're young and you have the time, do it. Like, try things. Yeah. But I'm not in that season anymore. And so I need to be very intentional. If I want to live on purpose and I want to live in step with the Lord's will for my life, I have to be able to slow down and ask the Lord, is this what you have for me? And so that means sometimes that's a no. And I'm going to ask again. And I'm going to ask again. And he's going to keep saying no sometimes. And that, most recently I just had to say no to one of our biggest events of the year, because it's just something that I feel like the Lord's saying no right now. And trust me with that. Trust me with the revenue loss. Trust me with the lack of relationships that you aren't going to get to hang out with. Like, trust me with all of it. And I just think, it's very important, because again, similar to what you were saying, you're robbing yourself of what the Lord has in front of you if you're constantly reaching for the next thing. And I kind of feel like when I'm overstacking myself and stretching myself out too thin, then I'm robbing myself from where he wants me.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah. How about you? How did you learn to say no? 'Cause you're good at no. Too.
I am good at no.
You're good at no.
I think I've learned mainly because when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And so for me, I've just learned that there is so many great things that the church can do and offer. Doesn't mean I'm called to do them all. It doesn't mean I'm supposed to do them all. And sometimes me saying yes means I'm robbing it from somebody else who maybe wants to take that leadership, but will never have the opportunity to do it because I took the yes for them.
Yep.
And so I've just learned to be really diligent of like, okay, there's friendships I want to cultivate in, especially, just be really intentional with. And so how do I make sure that I have time and not just put them in my calendar, but actually let's hang out. Let's go to Costco. Let's do everyday things with them. But if I'm saying yes to everything, then I'm saying no to them. And so just really, being intentional with my time and making sure that I say yes to the right things. And like I've said no to 2 big things this year. And it was just really hard because there's things that I love to do. I love to do these things, but yet I was just like, I need to, for just the sake of my mental health, the sake of my like spiritual health, how do I say no to these things, knowing that God's going to place amazing women to take my place in them and then give them the opportunity and allow me to have time to rest.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
I think even as we're talking, living on purpose doesn't always mean productivity. Like 24/7, you're doing exactly what God wants. Like the no is sometimes where the sweet place comes to, right? The margin to go to Costco with a friend. So maybe speak to that a little bit. What would you say to people listening who are feeling this pressure? So maybe they've explored some of this, content with the Uniquely You chart, but what about pressure for feeling like, okay, I have to find my thing to do? What would you say to them? How would you encourage them?
I think for me is just, I'm like, take the 24 hours that you have. Like, what are the things that can help you this 24 hours? What are things that, if you're family with kids, that is your priority, do that. If you have a couple hours to spend with God, do that. If you want to hang out with coffee with friends, what are the things that you can do right now at this season, knowing that it's just a season, right? Like eventually more time will come. If you are career and single and you have like evenings free, like how are you using that wisely? What are the things that you feel like I can do this right now? And it's okay. Like it really is okay to say no.
Yeah.
It really is, especially. And I always feel like, man, if God's calling me to do something, he's going to give me the strength and the endurance to do it. Mondays are just hard. And I do swim, region on Monday nights. And every time I'm like, oh, it's such a long day. And yet I show up and I have the best time ever with my girls.
Yeah.
And that's because that's where he has wanted me to be at the moment. And so it doesn't feel like a burden. It's actually something I enjoy doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes that joy comes after too.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Yeah. How about you, Alex? What would you say to those feeling the pressure that, okay, I got to figure out my life's calling now and go?
Yeah. Take a deep breath. I just think, I think that if you could rest in something, I would just say that just rest in the fact that the Lord is not in a hurry. I think we live in this culture, right, that is just so fast. And that pressure that you're feeling is not from the Lord. And so I have to remind myself this as well. And especially as I was starting to step into what the Lord had for me here in this, this season of my life, is just that, he's not in a hurry. And he has a perfectly designed plan for you. And so the best thing that you can do is just surrender that to him and say, Lord, what do you have for me? And he will reveal that to you. He's not holding anything out. He doesn't want to hold back on what he has for you. And so he just wants you to abide in him. And so that's something I've learned. And that has provided abundant, just comfort in my life. The moment I stopped striving to figure it out and just rested in God's plan, a lot of that, thanks to COVID, that really got refined during that time frame. But man, I'm not saying refined as it's a final, is what started a refinement process. But yeah, it just really, I feel confident in that he just wants us to abide in him and trust him with the process, that it might not be 1 year, it might not be 2 years, it might not be 5. Like it's a lifelong journey. Yeah. And just that there are seasons. I think people think like I have a purpose. That is it. I mean, underneath the umbrella of course, being faithful servants, going out and making disciples, our great commission. But I think the Lord, I think about like Psalm 1:3, where he says, you're like streams of living water, your tree next to a stream of living water that yields fruit in its season. And so I know for me, that is really when there's seasons where I'm feeling like purposeless and just kind of like wandering, and like think of like Katy Perry, like floating like a plastic bag, like what am I doing with my life right now? I have to remember that the Lord has seasons for me. Yeah. And there are purposes for each season. Yeah. And not everything is a fruitful abundance of just like, I don't know, purpose and things. I don't know. Yeah. So it's just, that's something I would say, just rest in that. Yeah. In those truths that we can hold on to.
Yeah. And I think when I ask that question, I think of actually those that are graduating college. They're kind of in that in between, right? And so the world's told you, okay, go pick your major and you're going to find your dream job. Yeah. And then your life is going to be complete. And then you go through the major and you hate it. Yes. And then you don't want to do it. Yeah. And then now what do I do? And you just feel this purposelessness instead of like, no, even right now, God has something for you. The purpose is not the job, the career, the calling, right? It's what we're doing with our lives daily. And you may even do it, as you were talking about seasons. My whole life, I wanted to be a teacher. So I went to school, I became an elementary school teacher, and I did it for a few years. And there was a ton of fruit that came out of that. But I'm like, this isn't quite what I thought it was going to be. And so through, well, maybe not failure, that's a strong word, but doing something and realizing this isn't it is how my purpose came about, through getting to teach women the Bible. And so sometimes the failure, the thing that didn't work out, is how you discover your purpose.
Absolutely.
Okay, so maybe in these last couple minutes, any last little bit of encouragement, knock us out with some wisdom. What do you have for us? Some encouragement for those who are desiring to live on purpose or serve faithfully. What would you say to them?
I think for me, it took me about 7 years from when I went to Romania to when I just felt God calling me to Costa Rica. Yeah. And I just waited.
Mm-hmm.
And I was faithfully waiting. And I think honestly, for me, that was the best season and the hardest season, was knowing like, I know I'm supposed to go somewhere overseas, but yet I don't know when and how. And yet God just like really helped shape my foundation on scripture for me to be able to do what I need to do overseas. And so I think just be faithful in the waiting, knowing like we've talked about seasons, it is a season, but be faithful. So how are you drawing closer to God in that season? Like, how are you seeking him? And how are you, even in lamenting, if you're like, I don't want to be here, lament to him, pray to him, and he will be faithful to hear you. But just be faithful in that time, and knowing that's for a purpose and reason, and that he will use that to continue to show you what he wants for your life.
That's good.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really have anything else. That's so good. Yeah, I don't know. I think I've said a lot of what I feel like I'm passionate about in regards to this, is just, just resting in those truths of what we know and what we know to be true about what the Lord has for us, that he's not withholding. That is not his heart, and he wants good for us. He works all things for his glory and our good. And so if you're in a season where you're not feeling like it's very good because you don't feel like you're producing or you're putting out, or culture's making you feel, society's making you feel like you're not of value, that's just simply a lie. And so, I just think there's so much we can rest in that's true. And that is that God loves us and he has good for us. And if it doesn't happen in our timeline, maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And so,
good. Yep. For his glory and our good. That's a great way to end. Well, thanks you guys for coming on and talking about living on purpose.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the WellCast. As always, don't forget to subscribe and tell your friends about us. For more information about the Well Community Church, visit thewellcommunity.org.